Okay, so I've decided not to bother about the hair and stuff because it's doing its own thing today. The thing I wanted to talk about was old people. For me, that is anybody who is 60 onwards. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that old people are boring. They're not. You have to realise that once you start talking to people, and don't patronise them, talk to them like they're real people, because they are, and ask them about their past, because I find it's like reading a really good book. Get them talking about their childhood and the things that happened to them, and it's absolutely fascinating, the things that you learn and the different way people used to look at things. I find it so fascinating, and I know I'm using the word fascinating a lot, but it is. If you listen to them and you really listen and talk to them and ask them questions about things. I mean, I used to do it with my grandmother and my great aunts. I used to ask them about when they were kids, because they were born, my nan was born in 1899, my aunt Let was born in 1901. So their view of life and the attitudes at that time are completely different to what I was. And I was born in like 1961, so there's a 60-year gap there. And the difference in how people look at things and think of things and what's allowable and what isn't allowable is fascinating. I mean, they were flappers, for God's sake. And you don't think of flappers in England in the 20s. You think of it like America, but they had them in England, and all the kiddie things that they used to do, where they used to get into trouble with their dad's barrow, because he used to be a fruiter. So he'd take his barrow around selling his fruit on his barrow, and he used to get them to help. Only Aunt Floss couldn't be relied on because she'd eat all the produce. So it was silly things like that. And when they tell it's so much more interesting than when you hear these second-hand accounts. It brings it to life, and it's so much more interesting. And people go on about kids and all that you should do for them and things you should learn with them and all that sort of thing. But you can learn much more from old people. Carbolic soap, for instance. I mean, I even remember carbolic soap, and I was brought up in the 60s and 70s. Admitted it was mostly in my nan's house, but I remember it. And they'd have these fascinating stories. I mean, I have met people and really enjoyed talking to them. I met a gentleman, purely by accident, who used to be in Africa as a warden. And when you listen to him, it's like the real life version of Sanders of the River. And it was like that. And you meet other people, some of them were really, really poor and bad off, sort of thing. And other people were really sort of rich compared to them. And they had money to spend and the things that they did and all that. And there are little instances where you have not folklore but family lore. A perfect example, although it's not going back to the really old people, my second, third or cousin, his wife, apparently the first date that they had, she came home from that first date and she told her mother she was going to marry him, and she did. And they're still happily married 40 years later. But you get these little bits, these little acorns from where the tree grows of the family. And it's so sad that a lot of this is lost because nobody puts it down. Nobody does it. Which is why I've started on a family thing where I've got all the little acorns, the little stories that people have told me in the family. And little stories from neighbours. They don't have to be family. They can be neighbours because it adds on to the family. My dog, I should say the family dog, Tip the first. He used to go walkies, if you like, with my neighbour's dog, Patch. And they used to have a reputation around the whole of Bordesley Green where we used to live. And everybody knew him. And this is a kind of a story that you don't want to die. You want it to be passed down. I don't have any kids. So if I'm going to pass these on, I'm going to have to write them down, which I think is wonderful. But what I'm saying, the nut and bolt of this is don't dismiss old people. Listen to them, talk to them. It's so interesting. And you learn things from them. Things like, and this is going to sound ridiculous, I know, but don't get into debt. If you can't afford something, do without. It will not kill you. We're not talking food or clothes. We're talking silly things that you can buy when you can afford them. If you can't afford them, do without. You don't get into debt. You can later do things that you find even more important. Or you can buy that thing if you want that dress. You can buy it another time when you can afford it. Find something else. I mean, that's a very simple version of it. But it's so interesting talking to them. It warms your heart in a weird and wonderful way. It does warm your heart when you listen to them, when you don't judge what they're saying, you just listen to them. It's like, if you like Dickens, you will love listening to really old people in their 80s, their 90s, when they tell you their stories. It's just wonderful. It's better than any book you can ever get because it's real life. So what I'm saying is listen to them. Take time out. Talk to people. On a bus, a relative, a friend. It doesn't matter. A complete stranger. You can find the most wonderful things about them. I mean, I met a woman who used to do the planes, sending planes from one place to another during the war because the men were out on the field, so they had the women pilots. Things like that. It's so fascinating, it's so interesting, and you miss it. It's kind of like a real-time get-together with a who do you think you are person, you know? Only you're not the relative, you're the person who's listening to them, you're documenting it, you're finding out these things, and it's fascinating. It doesn't matter what walk of life they come from. It will be a completely different living situation, way of feeling, a way of talking, a way of everything. I mean, my nan used to call me a Wilson pill face if I pulled the face. Now, who's ever heard of that? But when I die, it's gone. Nobody will remember that. It may not be in a dictionary. Don't mean it wasn't real. My nan knew what it was, or my great aunts knew what it was. I know what it is. Don't let it die. You learn from the past, and it is beautiful in its own way. It's like nature. It's both beautiful, it's both cruel, and it's both ugly. It's all there. But if you never know about it, how are you going to learn? How are you going to get better? And I miss my nan and my aunts, and I miss my parents, and I don't want them to die when I die, so I'm going to write about it. Hopefully it will be good, but it might not be. But that's my project for 2017-18. I'm going to write their stories as much as I can. It might hopefully be a bit humorous, but it won't be pulling